So I should say Shalom Chavarim today, because it is 3:05 a.m. where I am. Yesterday morning, I hopped on a plane and I landed in Tel Aviv.
Oh, really?
What a place to be at this moment in time. I am so grateful to be here at this moment in time. For all of those who are worried, if anybody is, actually it's kind of quiet here. Doesn't belie the fact that we have been through a lot and continuing to go through a lot as a people. Obviously, there were 11 days of war. The way I guess I found out about it was my son called me, who plays basketball here, as you know. I guess it was Tuesday night. He was driving home from his basketball practice and he calls me, he goes, "Mom, I think I'm a little afraid." I went to practice with him tonight. So it's about an hour and a half. He could see rockets in the air. The roads were all closed. There were fires. I said, "I'll just stay on the phone, honey, with you. Don't worry." And I did. And he got home. And then about 3 o'clock in the morning, his time, I got a text that said, "Hey, Mom, I love you." And I'm like, okay, I think you need a good book. You can't sleep. And he goes, "Don't freak out. Don't freak out. I'm in a bomb shelter." Why would I freak out? Come on, people. Every day your son says to you, "I'm in a bomb shelter." And for all of us who follow the events here in Israel from afar in America, it's always much harder to be away than here. And because all we hear are little clips and snippets of stories that are horrible. We see pictures that are horrible. And we saw really a country, I felt, I don't know about you, that has really risen up and spoken its mind about how it feels about the Jewish people. There was a fantastic article today in the New York Times by Bret Stephens. I happen to be a big fan of his. I don't always agree with what he says, but he spoke about the rise of anti-Semitism and trying to somehow disassociate that from the rise of anti-Zionism, as if they're not one and the same in some way. And then I read Marshall's note today from Maccabi USA, Marshall, and I thought it was really well said, right? That we are appalled in a way of the rise of anti-Semitism. And it's not just here in Israel. What's scary is it's all over the world. It's in the incidences that we've read about in Los Angeles, the incidents we've read about in New York City. It's the storming of the streets in Italy. It's the writing of social media posts that are not being taken down that said Hitler had it right. I just recently read this book and I'd like to recommend it to every single one of you. I am a huge fan of Michael Lewis, and his new book was Premonition, which is about the pandemic. And it is brilliantly written and researched. And there's there's a quote in the beginning of the book by a local health director out in California. And she goes, "You know what? I had to come to the determination that no one's coming to save us." And I suppose that's how I feel now as well. There's no one coming to save us except us. And so we must continue, if we haven't done it well enough, but even stronger, stand together in the face of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, because there's actually no rational reason for it. There never has been, but yet we've never lived through it in quite the way we do. I know there's so many Holocaust survivors who said this will never happen again. We said we will remember, so it will not happen again, but yet it's happening again. And I know Arnie, my co-host, is deeply involved in this work as well as the CEO of the UJA of New Orleans. And I know, Arnie, you'd want to weigh in on this as well.
Well, thanks, Donna. First of all, it's great to see you. As I said to some of the folks before we all got on, what commitment. 3 a.m, we're doing the Maccabi Sports Show. So thank you for being here with all of us. And, it's been about a month since our last show, and boy, a lot in the world has changed. Let's first of all count our blessings on some things. The COVID numbers in our country and elsewhere continue to go down, and very slowly, even in the sports field, as stadiums and arenas are reopening, we start to see a little bit of normalcy coming back, and hopefully more this summer. And certainly what we've seen both on the streets in our country and in Israel over the last 3 weeks is I think the word appalling was a really good word this morning that Maccabi put out there, because I think we should really all be appalled by what's taking place. Never, I think, in my lifetime have I ever really had a sense of fear of people attacking other Jews out in the open the way it's happened. And, it's just got to stop. And for all of those that are on, by the way, if I can plug something, on Thursday afternoon at 4 o'clock, there is a national event going on with most of the national Jewish organizations to combat the anti-Semitism and to stand together for that. And I would encourage you to look for that either in your own communities or federation or synagogues, whatever it might be. And the last thing I just want to say, and I had the opportunity to write an op-ed a few days ago on this, is, you know, what the conflict in Israel showed to me, and there's so many takeaways that you could take from it, but the one takeaway that I took was, you know, maybe it was a wake-up call for all of American Jewry, because I think in a lot of ways, we kind of take Israel for granted. We know about its military superiority. We know about its success over the 73 years. But I think we sometimes don't understand that they live in a very, very dangerous neighborhood. And at any given time, an enemy could rise up. And as we saw, lob bombs against Israel, lob rockets against Israeli cities, just an absolutely atrocious activity. So let's hope that the peace and the calm holds. Let's hope that the politics in Israel work themselves out in the next couple weeks, and that we can hopefully move towards a better day and a more peaceful day, and hopefully ultimately, you know, what I would like to see, a two-state solution. So enough editorializing. We have a really great show tonight.
No, we really do, and we're happy to answer all questions. And Jessica, if you'll just give us one more minute, I just wanted to share one more thing, because I just think it's beautiful about the power of sports. Jessica has an amazing career, ongoing career in sports, and the power of sports is this. For some reason, basketball in the North did not close down right away, and my son had to go to practice, and he was not going to leave his teammates. And it's one of those nights where I'm pretty nervous. Sirens had been going off. They'd spending time in the bomb shelter. By the way, I saw his bomb shelter. Oh my gosh, it wasn't a nice bomb shelter. I suppose I've heard there's nice ones. My friends were in ones where they served wine. His was not that one. And he sends me a note. He goes, in the car with his Christian Muslim teammate, Abu, and his Jewish teammate who played for the Jewish national team for 10 years. He goes, they're talking both sides right now. Fascinating, Mom, all in Hebrew. I'm following. And I'm thinking, wow, what an experience. They're going together to play together in a team. They get to their practice site. The coach brings everybody together, and they're all from all different places. And he says, this is what we do. We're a team. We're a family. We stick together. That night was a pretty dangerous night. And I begged him not to drive back to Tel Aviv, and he decided that that was not the best thing to do. And yet, where did he stay? He stayed with Abu, his Christian Muslim teammate, and his father, who took good care of him, took him in, right? Fed him breakfast, got him up in the morning, make sure he got out safely. And it's those kinds of bonds that sports create, where the game of life truly does pop its head up and remind everybody that we can be really great teammates. I hope he's taking notes. I know that he keeps a journal, but to be able to get a little bit distance and realize all the things he's lived through is really powerful. I will also say that my other son, he's a twin, kept saying to me, Mom, you must get him home now. And I'm like, what are we going to do? An extraction? That's just not happening here. And to his credit, my son Jacob said, Mom, I'm not coming home now. There's no way I'm coming home now. I love this country more than I ever have before, and I would not leave. And that actually is the spirit of the Jewish people you feel when you get here, the Israelis, is this is our home, this is our life, and we are going to stand for it. We're going to stand for it strongly. Okay, Jessica, you have stood for a lot as well, and you continue to do so. Thank you so much for saying yes to our invitation tonight. We're going to talk about lacrosse as well, which, by the way, Israel has done an amazing job in building a strong lacrosse program. But first, we're going to talk about you. Listen, Arnie, all I can tell you, she's a mom of 2 boys, check. She's a mom of 2 dogs, check. She works in the sports world, check. She's Jewish and went to summer camp. How can I not relate to this woman in the most profoundly important ways, right? But currently, she is the Deputy Commissioner and EVP of Business Affairs for the National Lacrosse League. And we know lacrosse has really been working hard to find their way in the mainstream. It is one of the most popular growing youth sports for both men and women, although she is the National Lacrosse League is the men's league. Since she, I mean, I don't know, you'll tell us how many years. I can't remember how many years. She previously served as the Vice President of Community Development, Culture, and Growth at the National Hockey League. Of course, Gary is a good friend of all of us here at Maccabi USA, so we love all the effort she had at the NHL. And she is one of the most prominent, yet another prominent lawyer who came out of Proskauer. David Stern, Gary Bettman are two others that came out of Proskauer who, and I think, you know what, is Doug Proman one of those, Jessica?
Yes.
Yes, I was with Doug last week.
The list goes on. The list
I know,
goes on.
it's amazing. I actually was with Doug. Him and I are on a board together. We should have Doug. Maybe we'll allow Doug to come on the show as well. Anyway, we're really happy to have Jessica, an incredible executive in the world of sports, but also renowned because as a woman, she has totally risen to the heights and has made such great contributions in so many different ways. Arnie, I'm going to turn it to you to ask Jessica's first question because I know that you always love to do that. Welcome everybody to Maccabi USA Sports Show this evening.
Thank you, Donna, and welcome, Jessica. Really, it's awfully nice to have you here. I'm going to start out with an easy one, a Michigan question, but I got to ask you, can you got to guarantee, I'm a Northwestern grad, so you have to guarantee that the Northwestern women are going to win the National Lacrosse Championship this weekend. We're all watching for that.
We always root for the Big Ten. If as long as Michigan doesn't lose for it to happen, we root for the Big Ten.
There you go. Perfect answer. So I just want to talk to you a little bit about Michigan. Now, what I found really interesting, I mean, obviously you had a great academic career at Michigan and at Fordham Law, but you were the assistant manager for men's ice hockey and football. And I'm just kind of curious what kind of led you into that? Maybe talk about your childhood in terms of your sports background and, did working in men's sports at the collegiate level, was that kind of the appetizer to start the career in the professional side?
Yeah. Well, before I answer your question, Arnie, I have to say I'm so honored and humbled to be here with you all. Donna, you're such an icon. You've always actually been an icon for me in the industry long before I had the opportunity to know you personally. So it's such a privilege to have been invited here to join you. So thank you. And my Jewish identity is really important to me. And so to have all of that come together is very special. And thank you for the opportunity. For me, working in sports, particularly at Michigan, was actually very intentional. I always knew I wanted to work in sports. You were talking, Donna, about the power of sports to unite communities. I'm a quote person. I have quotes all over my office, and the one over my right shoulder is actually Nelson Mandela's quote that says, "Sport has the power to change the world." And that is actually why I wanted to work in sports since I was a child. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and it was the melting pot of the universe. And although I went to Jewish school until I was 8th grade, so I went to yeshiva and learned Hebrew. And as per my parents, and my mom's on the line today, as per my parents' directive, got a very solid Jewish education. I made the decision in high school to go to public school, and I went to James Madison, where I was really the minority in my high school. And I was very fascinated by the things in our social fabric that bring people together. And I always felt that sport was one of them. And racial equality was something that I was always very passionate about. I was actually recently at my parents' house in Brooklyn, and I found a poem that I had written when I was 12 about Black and white people and analogizing them to harmonizing like a piano. So my passion for diversity, equity, inclusion dates back to the age of 12. And really sports for me was a vehicle to address social change. And I always viewed it as such, and not just because it brought people together from a fan perspective, but it really felt to me like the purest form of a meritocracy, where if you are someone who can contribute to your team, and maybe the example of what you were talking about, Donna, with your son is a good one, that the team will find a way to harmonize, because we want everybody to be able to contribute in order for the team to be successful. And I just, that model is something that society can really learn from. And so I went to Michigan intentionally to try to work in the athletic department. and specifically sought out the opportunity to be a manager of the athletic teams there because I wanted the experience of working in sport management, and sought out the opportunity to work in hockey, football, and also in baseball. And so for me, it was really a vehicle to get experience working in the industry long before sport management was the thing that it is today. What people, there's established sport manager programs now at Michigan. When I applied for that position, I basically had to create it. I approached Red Berenson and the other coaches and sort of helped them to see how I could add value for the team. But it wasn't as if it was like an official position. In today's world, it very much is a official position.
Very official. And it's interesting that you did it then, because usually we have some younger kids on who always are learning. And we have a kid from Syracuse who I love. He's not here today, but like the idea that you went out and became early on involved. We tell kids all that all the time. Go find places to work and volunteer so you can learn the sports business. There's a question right up on the board right away, and you mentioned Red Berenson. Tell us what it's like to work for Red, and for those who don't know who Red is, a little bit about Red.
Oh, sure. So Red Berenson was the University of Michigan head coach for the men's hockey team. He has a very gruff and hardcore reputation. Very sort of intimidating and unapproachable, which he is. He's also very old school, and I was sort of dissuaded and warned that there was no way he was going to let Vince work around the team, and definitely not a woman. So I felt like I had a lot of barriers to overcome and had to really work extra hard to prove to him that I could add value and that I was there for the right reasons and that I was going to take the role seriously. And of course, working for him was a very good learning experience for me. I don't think I ever worked for anyone like that again. But he and I crossed paths multiple times over the course of my career, because when I ultimately ended up at the NHL, I had the opportunity to go back and see him when we were working on the collective bargaining agreement to draft the college eligibility criteria. And we wanted to get input from college coaches. And there was discussion around the table, like, does anybody have a relationship with Red Berenson? It would be great to get his perspective. And it was like such an exciting moment for me to be able to reach out to Red to say, like, I told you I was serious about my career. I'm working at the NHL and I actually need your input. And so I went back to meet with him, and he and I have stayed in touch over the years. And I actually don't know whether he hired students and women in the future after me, but I'd like to think he did, because I really tried hard to show him that there was an opportunity to really make the program better by bringing new people to the table.
Right. And yes, we let's hope that he did. We did. Danny, did you go to Michigan?
Absolutely. Go Blue.
Oh, there you go. Jordan Weinstein said this was the best thing we've ever done because Jessica came from Michigan. That was the most important. Nothing mattered, but other than she came from Michigan. But Michigan does engender those kind of alumni feelings.
Yes. Yes.
Arnie?
Yeah. Well, first of all, welcome on the chat. Welcome to Rick Balfour from Madison, Mississippi, just up the road from me. Well, nice of you to join us, Rick. Just want to stay one more second, since we're talking about kind of how you got into it, because your career is really interesting. Donna and I both have a sports business career, and we started at that level and elevated up, and you clearly have done that in an incredible way. But for anybody that's watching on the Zoom, and we record these so people watch these afterward, what's your recommendation in terms of how do they get into this business, stay in it, and grow? Do you go to law school like you do? Should you go for a graduate sport management program? What do you recommend young people when you speak to them now?
Usually what I recommend is to pursue an area from an academic and work perspective in terms of your experience that you love, regardless of whether you end up or stay in the sports industry. And I try to help aspiring students to really understand that it's an industry and not necessarily a profession. There's so many different things you can do in the industry. And that was really good advice that I got when I went to Proskauer and I was trying to choose the area of law I was going to practice. And I was like, I want to be a sports lawyer. And they're like, well, there's no such thing actually as being a sports lawyer. You can be a labor lawyer, you can be a litigator, you can be a corporate lawyer, you can be a real estate lawyer, you can be a tax lawyer. And all of those types of lawyers can actually do work in the sports industry, just like you could work in the entertainment industry or you could work in hospitality. Like it is an industry and not necessarily an area of practice. And for me, I chose to be a labor lawyer, and that has really served as the foundation for my sports career in the sports industry. But there were many assignments and years at Proskauer where I wasn't working on sports clients. It wasn't as fun, but I still loved the work and I really love being a labor lawyer. And so the advice I usually give to people who want to work in sports is to find an area that you enjoy the substantive work, because the industry is competitive and high profile such that they can hire people who are good at and passionate about what they're actually doing in their substantive role. And so just wanting to work in sports isn't really enough of a selling point when you're applying for jobs or looking to work in the industry.
That's interesting. All right, so let's dig into sports, because sports is fascinating these days on so many different levels. But Danny, remind me, where are we on lacrosse for Maccabi? Are we fielding any teams?
Yes, and I'll let Shane be specific, but I will point out that
Sorry, Shane. Go ahead.
The first time lacrosse was contested at the Maccabi was 2017. We brought a junior girls team. They had 3 teams in the field: Israel, Great Britain, and the U.S. The U.S. won the gold medal. And I know that the plan is to increase the number of teams and the divisions for the coming games.
All right. Well, all right. So here's my question to you, Jessica. You're working at the NHL, one of the top 4, the big 4, as we say in sports, right? Big time league, big time budgets, et cetera. And you get this opportunity across your decks to go to lacrosse. Now, we know lacrosse is growing nationally, right? We know that there's big time. I grew up in the hotbed of lacrosse as a kid growing up. I grew up on Long Island, right? We all of our kids went to play at Cornell or Maryland or Hopkins, so I had a real appreciation of lacrosse, but it's not one of the big 4. I know you're going to change that soon, but give us your status report as the deputy commissioner, and I love that title, of the National Lacrosse League today.
The status report is positive because in today's world, there's so much more room for challenger and emerging properties. I think 10 years ago, before the emergence of streaming and digital platforms where you could essentially become your own media company, it was a very different world. And if you weren't the big 4, you were basically vying for traditional media dollars. And unless you had the ratings to demand that type of revenue, it was going to be hard to compete. But in today's world, my experience has been, and my hope was when I took the role, that there's a much broader audience and opportunity, both from a fan perspective as well as from a brand perspective, because we can be really like an onboarding, both for fans in terms of our ticket price being more accessible, as well as for brands in terms of investment from a sponsorship perspective, as well as for media in terms of media rights. If you are a brand and you want to work and have an opportunity to partner from a partnership or marketing perspective with the NFL, it's pretty unaffordable today. Like the budgets that are required to be able to compete, even in the NHL. And I know Jamie Hacker's on the phone, who I worked with at the NHL. So I'm excited to see her.
Hi, Jamie.
Jamie's a lawyer at the NHL. So we overlap there. But for us, we can really be a proof of concept with brands that are looking to innovate and find next gen technology mechanisms for interacting with fans and be more risk tolerant than the big 4 in terms of ways to engage fans, whether it's sports betting or, putting mics on refs or doing things that maybe other leagues might be more reticent to do because they frankly have more to lose. For us, when brands are looking to really push the envelope in terms of what the next generation of sports is going to look like, we have been and continue to be a great partner for that. And because of that, a lot of traditional sports investors are investing in our league. And so what most people probably don't realize, even though we're an emerging property, we are now almost soon to be a 15-team league. And we were only a 9-team league in 2016. So we've expanded tremendously in the last several years. And most of our owners actually own teams in the NHL, NFL, and NBA. And so we share ownership with traditional Big Four leagues, and therefore we get the shared resources and the level of sophistication from an operational standpoint with our league as well. So there's a lot to be excited about for me, especially coming from the NHL. I learned so much working for Gary and Bill and all the great people at the league, and definitely prepared me to do this role. And this is sort of like being at a 35-year-old startup. You asked how long our league's been around. This will be our 35th season. And we call ourselves a 35-year-old startup.
I totally understand it. The WNBA is celebrating its 25th year this year, so I totally get it. But you said there's 15-team leagues. I'm just curious. I want to make, not only for everyone on the phone, were there 2 lacrosse leagues? Did you guys merge? What happened?
There were, as of, let's say a year ago, there were actually 3 lacrosse leagues. There were 2 outdoor leagues and 1 indoor league. So our league is actually the indoor league. Our league is actually box lacrosse. So we play inside of an NHL rink, inside the boards and glass. And our version of lacrosse is really more like a combination of lacrosse, basketball, and hockey than it is like pure lacrosse. We have a shot clock and the similar type of cadence to a basketball game in the way that the offensive defense change possession. But the 2 leagues that you heard about that merged are the 2 outdoor leagues. And that occurred during the pandemic.
And as a competition, do you feel that that's competitive? If somebody's going to buy lacrosse, are they going to buy indoor and outdoor? Or are they only going to buy outdoor? Or how does that work in the marketplace? I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's a great question. I actually spent an hour on the phone with the outdoor league, the PLL, today, because we talk all the time about synergies and opportunities to go to market with a year-round sports property. So they operate in the summer months, we operate in the winter months. So if someone's looking for sort of a one-stop shop, we can go to market with our complementary assets. There's really no reason for us to compete, particularly because we share approximately 40% of our players with the outdoor league. So our players go from their league to our league and then our league back to their league. So we really can't view ourselves as competitors, and we don't. And we really try to support each other through promotion and marketing. And I think really the main distinguisher, I would say, for us is that the field lacrosse community here in the US tends to be very endemic. We call it like the endemic lacrosse community. People who grew up playing lacrosse, who love lacrosse. That is not our fan base. Our fan base tends to be event goers who are millennials, who are looking for entertainment. Our sport is the experience of being in game, is that there's music playing during the run of play. It's very much like, almost like a minor league baseball game, in that it's very interactive and it's fun. It's fun first, and not taking ourselves so seriously. And I would say that is probably the distinguishing factor. Actually, I'm curious, like, I don't know if there's like a way to put in the chat if anyone has actually ever been to or seen an NLL game. I wouldn't be surprised. Oh, someone said go Wings. Yay. Shane has been to a game. So I'm curious whether people, yes, the Seals, yes, yay, yeah. Look at all these people who are NLL fans. I love it. I'll send everyone who's an NLL fan some merch. So just send me an email.
Oh,
and
that's right. Get your information to Mackenzie. She will definitely
I
make
will.
that
If you're an NLL fan and you have a favorite team, you send that to me.
All right. So,
Make
so
sure,
your
and make sure you watch us when we come back on December 3rd.
okay. So your league goes from when? December 3rd to?
Usually we end the second week of May.
Oh, okay. So are you? What happened? All right. So Arnie, wait, Arnie. I'm throwing it to you.
Okay, throw it to me. All right. Well, I want to stay on the topic because I think there are a lot of people that don't know a whole lot about the league, including the one asking the questions here. But I learned a lot today reading about the league. But there were a few things. So, well, first of all, give us a little bit more. Like, where to get the players from? Is there a draft? I know you have a collective bargaining agreement. Just kind of talk a little bit about the infrastructure of the league. I think that would be interesting to people. And then the one thing I really found interesting was how many Canadian teams that you have. It's really a league that is, combined U.S. and Canadian with a strong Canadian presence. And so talk a little bit about that and kind of when did the Canadian presence start from the very beginning, or did you add those teams through expansion over the years?
Yeah, no, great question. Particularly with this being a primarily U.S. audience, I'll start by saying just forget everything you know about field lacrosse if you want to understand the National Lacrosse League or box lacrosse, because the first word I would use to describe our constituents who play the game is Canadian, Indigenous roots, and blue collar. And there's possibly three words that you would ever use to describe field lacrosse. Definitely not. Blue collar, Canadian, and Indigenous. That is the culture of our game. And the truth is, Arnie, it was born in Canada and it was born in the Indigenous community as a tribal game. And it is actually, again, most people don't realize this, is actually the national pastime of Canada, not hockey. Sorry, Jamie. It is actually lacrosse. And when Canadians refer to lacrosse, they're referring to indoor box lacrosse, the NLL's version of lacrosse. They're not referring to the field game that we play here. So there's a total separate strategy, I would say, from a marketing, communications, growth, challenges, barriers, opportunities that exist north of the border versus south of the border. 75% of our players are Canadian in our league. And that, I think, is the thing that shocks people the most, because here, again, when you talk about lacrosse, people think of the Northeast, they think of prep schools, they think of the Ivy Leagues, they think of Johns Hopkins, they think of these schools that form the basis of what we think of lacrosse here in the US, but it is not that in Canada, and it is definitely not that in our league. Yes, Kira, I agree. Our sport is very physical. So the analogy that I've used for people is if you've ever watched indoor soccer as compared to field soccer, it's like that. So we're in an enclosed space and the players have to be really quick, really fast, tight turns, and it's very physical because of the boards, like hockey. So there's hits into the boards, there is fighting. It is in that way probably more similar to hockey, and again has this sort of like Canadian cultural element in the game itself. I guess the last thing you asked about, Arnie, is about the structure of the league. So we have now 14 teams announced, but we're actually about to announce our 15th team. So we will be 15 teams. And 10 of our teams are in the US and 5 of them are in Canada. And we are actively selling our 16th team as we speak. And the model of our league is very similar to the NBA or the NHL or the NFL in that we have a league office and our teams are franchise-based ownership. So we operate through a board of governors, just like the WNBA or any of the other sort of traditional leagues, where the league office manages the operation of the league, and we have a commercial arm, and we report to the board for all governance and budgeting and business planning.
Okay. And that makes a lot of sense. And Stephen Jackson always has some good questions, and he's particularly interested tonight in understanding how you are growing, what's being done to help grow youth soccer, youth lacrosse. So funny, we'd say youth soccer, it feels like those words are tied together. But youth lacrosse, is it more indoors or outdoors? And the opportunities for high school kids to be recruited by colleges. I know that, I mean, college lacrosse is huge these days. There's a lot of club teams as well. And then the ratio between men and women. And I know that women's lacrosse is one of the top 5 growing sports for women. And actually, after you answer this, we could talk a little bit about Maccabi women lacrosse, if that's possible. So what's happening in the world to grow lacrosse for kids, Jessica?
So was really excited to hear you guys share about the games, and that I think you said UK, Israel, and the US were competing in 2017. Not sure if people are aware, but World Lacrosse, which is our international governing body, is making a push to be recognized to join the 2028 LA Olympics. And so there's a huge push right now across all of the governing bodies, and frankly, in our league as well, supporting it from a marketing and promotional perspective to try to help lacrosse get into the Olympics for 2028. And obviously the growth at the youth level is critically important to that strategy. And so we partner with Hockey Canada. See, I still have my NHL hat on sometimes. I get yelled at by our board all the time for slipping up and calling us the NHL. To talk with all the governing bodies about how we can support their growth. One point I didn't mention earlier about our players in our league is that they are part-time currently. And so they maintain day jobs in addition to playing in our league. And for many of our players who have day jobs, they teach lacrosse during the week. And so that has really served as a catalyst for growing grassroots at a really faster pace than we otherwise would, because what kid wouldn't want to learn from a pro? And our pros are not like the retired guys, like the actual players who play on the weekend in front of 15,000 fans are teaching the clinics during the week with schools and in after school programs. And so that has really been the linchpin of our growth strategy from a grassroots perspective.
That's really cool. I like that a lot. I just wanted to mention here, Arnie, we will have an open women's lacrosse team and a U18 in the Maccabi game. So we have all women's lacrosse from the US. It looks like, Shane, that's happening. So I don't think, did you play lacrosse, Jessica?
I didn't, despite the fact
that but you know what? We can invite you to be the honorary chair of all of the women's teams that are going in 2022. If you've never been to the Maccabi games, it's one of the, and I could tell your mom definitely wants to come. I could tell right away.
Oh my God, yes, yes. And
unbelievable experience. We can have honorary chair, Jessica Berman. And I will say that
I have to say, Donna, my son's bar mitzvah was supposed to be in Israel this year.
Oh, it still can be. When is it? As long as it's not next week, I think you have a shot.
It was in March.
Oh yeah, so because of COVID.
But my next one is 10, so 2022 would be perfect. We'll go to Israel, all of us.
All right, there we go. Danny, Shane, like, wait, where's Marshall? This would be, right? Kenny, you like this? I love this. I think it's really great. And there's such a strong culture here for men's lacrosse that's growing. And it was a couple of Americans that really made that happen. How did you deal with COVID? What happened with COVID? I mean, it's been so challenging. Yeah. How did you and your league deal with it?
We have not played since March of 2020. And the main reason for that is that the Canadian border is closed and 75% of our players live in Canada and they have part-time jobs. So we can't do a Canadian division and a US division because I'll actually just give an example of like the most absurd fact I learned today, which is, some of our players are lawyers and doctors and scientists. Some of our players are police officers and firefighters. But today I met a player who is an underwater welder.
Oh my goodness.
When he's not playing in our game. And I was like, wow, I never thought I would ever meet someone who's an underwater welder. Nevertheless, someone who's a professional lacrosse player who's an underwater welder. So we couldn't play in COVID because we couldn't take these guys away from their day jobs. And not have them quarantine upon the return.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if you know this, but Gary Bettman was on our show, and he actually we broke the news about the Canadian and the U.S. Remember that, Arnie? Like all of a sudden we got picked up as a news organization because Gary said on this show about how he thought he had to do 2 separate divisions. We were a little late in getting your news, but that's so interesting. I guess so the salaries for your players at this point in time are not at the place where they can be making full-time salaries.
Correct.
I suppose
I hope we can
grow that's a goal.
Yes, and as it would be our pleasure to pay the players a livable wage when we can get the revenues to support it. So we're working on it.
I thought, Jessica, I thought that was one of the most interesting parts about the league, though, is it brought back images of, old time baseball where the players would play on the field and they'd have day jobs. And, and I think that's a great way to connect to the grassroots and develop a fan base that way. I want to ask you just for a second about women's lacrosse. I know there was a professional league. I think it shut down right after COVID, and seems like it's coming back. I know that's not the NLL, but to the extent that you can kind of let us know professionally what may be happening on the women's side, I think that would be interesting.
Yeah, so I'm not sure you guys are familiar with Athletes Unlimited.
Yes. Tell everybody what it is. Tell everyone what it is, Jessica, because it's such an interesting concept.
It is such an interesting concept. And I won't maybe do it justice, but basically John Patricoff, who's very seasoned executive in sports, joined with George Soros to launch what is called Athletes Unlimited, which is a conglomerate of, I think now 4 women's sports.
Yep.
And I believe they have they have a media deal both on linear and digital distribution. So they're actually, you can watch, I believe it's volleyball, lacrosse, softball, and I don't remember what the 4th sport is, but I know I've seen those 3 sports, but lacrosse is one of them, to answer your question, Arnie. And so the women's lacrosse players are actually playing professionally through this organization called Athletes Unlimited, which the concept is really to aggregate all of these women's properties together that wouldn't otherwise be able to survive on their own economically, and be able to leverage shared resources, as well as be able to sell across multiple platforms that play in different parts of the year.
And they actually pick their teams like every week, don't they? They almost have like a mini draft, and at least at lacrosse, I think, and have new teams created on a weekly basis. That's
yeah, I think they do like what we in sports call like the circus model, where they tour. And so it's a definitely a very different concept to like a traditional league that has a home city and you play for your community and you play for your, you work with local partners. It's a much more of a national play.
Right. So let me just David Perlman, who's on our call all the time. David actually runs minor league baseball in El Paso, and he is longtime executive. He's asking a number of questions about average attendance for the NLL and expansion fees and just things like that. Average ticket prices, things like that. If you could let the group know that.
Sure. Generally speaking, our average attendance is around, I would say, between 10 and 13,000. Which is actually surprising probably to most, because that's a pretty solid local fan base. Our ticket price is affordable, as I said earlier. So generally we're in like the $25 to $30 range. And so, for a family of 4, it's, to be able to go to a professional game and see the best athletes in a particular sport for $100 is probably unheard of. So our sport offers that. From an expansion perspective, if you know someone, send them my way. We're in the.
Wait, hold on. We might be able to get a group of ownership. Kenny Silverboard, let's get an ownership group tonight. I know Stephen. What do we got? How much is it? How much is a team?
I would say it depends on the market, but I would say in like the $10 million range.
Oh, listen, before we get off tonight, I think, Kenny, we can do that tonight, right?
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
mean, which market should we go for? Which one do you need?
Jacksonville, Florida.
Jacksonville, Florida. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's right. After my WNBA team, right? You know what? Maybe together, actually. We'll really elevate. There we go.
Raleigh, North Carolina. I've already got someone interested because of this call.
There you go. Eugene is
Great.
working it.
Right.
This is it. The Jews coming together. Really, this is awesome, Jessica.
Love it. I would love
Marshall's
it.
funny. Do you take a credit card? Yes, Marshall, we'll take your credit card.
Right.
That's okay if he isn't Jewish. You made it happen. You're the Jew here, right? It's cool, Eugene. It's fine.
Right. Right.
So that's
Jessica,
kind of cool.
you
Is there a team in Chicago? Roy Kessel's on the phone, and I guess that prompts my next question, Arnie, because Roy runs
go on, Donna.
he runs the Sports Philanthropy Network. Actually, he was a guest on our show. I think he was our last guest on our show. There's a lot of great work, but you have really invested your time. You continue to invest your time in being a philanthropist. You've done work for, let's see, I have a little list here. Obviously you ran the foundation for the NHL, which is a big deal. You did pro bono work at Proskauer. You're a member of the UJA Sports Committee. You're a member of the Women's Leadership Board with the Sports Innovation Lab, which I think is fantastic. I'm a little upset I wasn't invited to that, but it looks
I'm
fantastic.
upset that you're not there too.
I know, but tell me about your motivation for continuing to give back, pay it forward, be involved in things that matter to you.
Well, just first on the sports side, in terms of giving back to students and things like that, I often, I would say people are surprised, particularly people who work for me, to know that I do make time. I probably talk to 2 to 3 people per week. I try to anyway,
Right.
of people who want to break into the industry or need advice in their career. And the reason I do that is because at any points in my professional life, whether it was as a student or even when I was at a crossroads at the NHL, which was only a couple of years ago, people always made time for me. And so I force the time, and I feel like you can make the time. Typically for me, if I have, if I'm able to do it, it's on the weekends. And I always say to people, like, I'm really sorry, my weeks are just like busting at the seams, but I'll talk to you on a Sunday when I'm driving my son to hockey practice and my kids are tired of hearing my advice to students on, how to break into the sports industry or do's and don'ts. But at the end of the day, I feel like it's a responsibility that we all have. And I also learn a lot from those conversations, frankly, because when you talk to someone about their challenges or their opportunities or their insights, it forces you to reflect on your own experience. And so I find it to be sort of mutually beneficial to be introspective in that way. But in terms of other causes, I'll give a shout out to my mom because she's on the phone, and, we were raised to care about the world. I guess I'll give a shout out to my dad who passed away on April 19th. And, he was very charitable and philanthropic, and he took me every single weekend that we were free to give out hot dogs from Nathan's in Coney Island. And he always gave me the hot dogs to actually distribute on the streets, because he's like, you need to know what it feels like to have that privilege and to share what you have, because why else do you have if you're not going to share it? And that was always his philosophy, to share his time and to share whatever privilege in terms of resources that we had. So I feel like it's my family's legacy that we all were raised to give back, and my mom is on a gazillion nonprofit boards. We have to remind her to get paid for her time, because as women, I feel like we tend to not do that. But at the end of the day, when you put your head on the pillow at night, and having just lived through my father's funeral, what people say about you is how you treated them and how you showed up for them every day of your life. And you can't take all this other stuff with you. And so it's just a good reminder that what's important in life is to try to use what you have to give back and to help others.
Yeah, we're so sorry to hear about your dad's passing, Jessica. And we're really happy, Phyllis, that you're with us right? To celebrate his goodness in your daughter, right? Obviously, she embodies a lot of that in both of you. It's really, really special. We just have a few minutes left. If anybody has any questions, Bess Brodsky, I want to say it's great to see you. You're teaching, right? Aren't you teaching at Columbia or NYU? We can't hear you, but she's saying yes. I'm doing something like that.
Columbia, yes.
She's teaching at Columbia, so that's why she's happy. Do you guys know each other, Jessica? Do you know Bess?
Yeah, she's very good friends with my boss. If I hear more about Michigan, I got a package from Zigerman's. Is that what the deli's called?
Fingerman's.
Fingerman's, yes. I helped somebody get a job, a family friend who just got a job at BetMGM because the sports betting space is so hot. I was actually, it was actually an SBJ this week. I got mentioned in an article that Scott asked me to talk to the reporter. But yeah, I'm the career counselor for the graduates in sports management at Columbia. So I help graduate students get jobs and internships. And I'm also talking to Steve tomorrow about Masters golf in Israel next summer.
Oh, you are? You're following up on that. That's awesome.
Finally, I got all these emails and they happen so quickly, but I'm like, I meet the handicap, I'm the age. I just don't know if I'm good enough.
You're good enough. Trust me. I'll coach you. You're good enough. We'll talk. We'll talk for sure.
I'm in Cape Cod. I'm playing 4 days a week or 5. My husband says I'm addicted. So
I love it. We love that.
I love it.
Back from the PGA Championship. So we should talk.
And I listened to the Alana Kloss interview. That was so great.
I'm glad you like that. Arnie, do you want to wrap up with a really good question or a really mediocre question? Which one would you like?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much we can ask you, Jess. So much we can ask you, but I'll end it with this. You know, it has been such a strange year, and all of the leagues, all of the professional leagues and colleges endured a lot through COVID. And the other thing that I think we all went through was a lot of change in our country, racial change, social justice. And maybe you could just talk about how the NLL responded to all of that, and also what you thought about your former employer, the NHL, and how they navigated that process.
Yeah, well, I can say one of the things that attracted me the most to this league as someone who was working in culture and social impact at the NHL and running the foundation, as well as I shared my upbringing and my passion for diversity, equity, and inclusion, was the cultural roots of our game being tied to the Indigenous community and how authentic that shows up each and every day for every single player in my league. And I ran focus groups over the last 6 months with our players, and I did a cohort of only BIPOC players and 2 other cohorts that were mixed to get feedback on social justice, racial justice, and other social impact initiatives that we could put forward. And the prevailing view of everyone, whether they were white, Black, Indigenous, or Hispanic, or another person of color, is that our sport is so unique in that it is so rooted in the Indigenous community, and that no one who picks up a lacrosse stick would say otherwise. It is so embedded in the roots of our game, and it is taught from day one that you play lacrosse. And so for us, that was such an important defining platform for coming from a place of knowing who we are and finding the allyship through the very strong and inclusive culture that our sport brings to the table. That's not to say that we don't have immense amount of work to do to address unconscious bias and privilege and all the other things that show up everywhere else in this country and in the world. But one of the things I was so excited about was that element. And when we were presented with everything that happened over the last year with George Floyd and all of the aftermath with all of the other situations, it has continued to show up in such a way that the constituents within our league are so committed to those issues that it has really served as an inspiration for me. And I'm super excited that next season, I've been inspired to really launch entirely new and the league's first ever corporate social responsibility strategy that's dedicated to diversity, inclusion, and heritage. And I've been working on that during COVID, and we'll be launching it for next season.
That's fantastic. So what I would like to do is, first of all, thank everybody who's joined us tonight. And I want to actually take some of your words, Jessica, and expand them a little bit, because what you just said, we have to remember that we're coming from a place of knowing who we are. And you're speaking about the indigenous people in lacrosse. But tonight we also come together as a Jewish people, coming from a place of knowing where we are. And I'd love to encourage all of us to find the places where we can take that understanding and knowing who we are, and make sure we can continue to educate others of who we are, and what we have to give and what we can contribute. And in some way, in any way that we can mitigate any of these mistruths, right? These misperceptions, these kind of statements that continue to drive, if you will, a narrative that is anti-Semitic. I think we're all in on that team together. And it's a hard one, but I know it's one that actually, as you said, Jessica, comes from knowing who we are and where we've come from. So everybody, say hi to your kids, Jessica. Tell them they're Maccabi boys now, because they're just about getting to that time to be able to participate with us. Everybody be well, be healthy. We'll see you in 2 weeks, Arnie, correct?
No, I think we'll see you next week, I believe. I think
No, seriously? We have a show next week?
Correct me if I'm wrong. Dan, is next
Next week.
Yes, next week.
Yeah, we will.
Really? Back-to-back 3 a.m.s? Guys, you're killing me, but okay. All right.
We'll be
That's
talking
fine.
baseball next week, which will be a lot of fun. So come and join us again. Donna, be safe and
I will.
enjoy
I
Israel.
will.
And Jessica, thank you so much.
Thank you
It was
so
great-
much,
great
Jessica.
interview.
Love that you were with us. Really. And your mom? Thank you, Phyllis. Really appreciate it. Take care, everybody.
Good night, everybody.